have done it any differently. Way too much of an ego in high school. Okay, let's talk pain. The Invisalign diet like wasn't a thing for me. Was it worth it? If you're thinking about starting Invisalign and you have a million questions just like I did, I am sharing the start to finish process of my Invisalign journey, which will hopefully help you through your own journey. If you're new here, my name is Abby and I love to share my life and experiences as a 29-year-old moving out of survival mode and into living the best life she possibly can. So subscribe if you want to follow along. Okay, this is going to be a little bit of a long one because I wanted to give you every single detail and answer every possible question. So sit down and grab a snack and let's get into it. So first off, a little bit of background. I wanted to do Invisalign since my teens because I had some crowding in the bottom row of teeth that I never really loved the look of. I actually almost went to a consultation in high school, but I chickened out because at that time, we were gonna be getting regular braces. And honestly, I just had like way too much of an ego in high school and I just like couldn't do the metal braces. Going back, would I have done it any differently? Maybe. So like if you are in your high school years and you're watching this video now and thinking about whether or not you should do it, honestly, I would probably tell my high school self to just get over herself and do it because she's gonna be so grateful in her 20s that she already did it. But that being said, for being in my 20s, having Invisalign now was a pretty simple and easy process in my opinion. So do with that what you will. Anyways, with that being said, fast forward to my 20s, I had a lot of dentists constantly telling me that the crowding might cause an issue for me as I get older. Different things like it might be more difficult to clean, it could affect the integrity of my jaw, those types of things. So I just kind of like kept that in the back of my mind. I was really nervous about the lifestyle change that this would require, as well as how obvious Invisalign may or may not look. So that definitely held me back for a while. I finally decided to go to an Invisalign consultation that was free, and the orthodontist quoted me about 12 to 18 months. And he actually had me go to a specialist first because I actually had a crown in my top left molar from a few years ago, and I needed to check to make sure that everything was good with the crown so that we could confirm that like moving my teeth wasn't going to cause an issue. So I went to a specialist and unfortunately they actually found that I had an infection in that tooth because one of the roots was kind of small and hidden, so it didn't get filled properly when I had the root canal. So unfortunately there was an infection and I ended up having to get that tooth pulled, and then I had to let my mouth heal before I could start Invisalign. It took me about 9 months from the time that I had the Invisalign consultation to actually getting my trays. This was just because I think there were some like delays with waiting for the specialist to get back to me, and even to have that appointment in the first place. And then obviously I had to get the tooth removed, and then I had to heal from getting my tooth removed, and then you do your final scan and then they have to make the trays for you. So in March 2025, that is when I officially got the call that it was time to start my first trays. Okay, so next let's talk a little bit about attachments and elastics. So at the appointment where I was officially starting Invisalign, I went in, they laid me down, and they're very like quiet about all of this. And I think it's because like they're worried that they're gonna scare you off, which is like rightfully so. I watched a lot of TikToks before starting Invisalign, so I was prepared, but also not prepared, if that makes sense. But basically I did have to get attachments on nearly every single tooth, which I didn't want them at all, but I guess it's part of the process and it's just inevitable. I had an attachment on almost every single tooth, and they are basically these little buttons that they like fuse to your teeth or like cure on your teeth that the Invisalign will connect with to help create like the pressure and movement that you need to be happening in your mouth. They are so weird because when you take off your trays, it feels like you have like shark teeth. They're not smooth. Obviously, they start off a little bit more rough and sharp, and then as time goes on, they get smoother, but they're never like perfectly smooth like your teeth. So it's like actually nicer to have your tray on than off, which I think is probably by design. I also did not have to have any elastics. I think they typically do that for when you have like an over or under bite, or just depending on what kind of movement needs to be done. So my first series or set with Invisalign was actually 20 trays. I was originally told to wear each tray for 10 days, which was a little disappointing because I was hoping that it would be the 7-day trays, but I was grateful that it wasn't the 14-day trays. So for the first 2 trays, I wore them for 10 days, and around the 7th day, I noticed noticed that my tray would feel looser and just kind of more uncomfortable in my mouth, and it was really annoying me. So I booked another appointment and I saw my ortho, and he's like, okay, like you're doing good, so we can try the 7 days and see how that goes. So I tried the 7 days and everything went really well. So I continued the rest of my Invisalign process wearing my trays for 7 days each. Throughout the process, you basically have a few check-in appointments. I think you have at least one check-in appointment in the middle of your series where they make sure everything's moving and tracking properly, and then they will give you the other half of your set of trays. So I think I had gotten trays like 10 to 18 at that point. Then you go back in at tray 18 and they have to check and make sure everything's still going good, and you get new scans done. These are the scans that they do so that they can build your next set of trays. I guess most people will need 2 series of trays, sometimes 3 or more. So tray 19 and 20, I did have to wear for 2 weeks each while I was waiting for my new trays to be made. Unfortunately, tray 19 and 20 weren't sitting properly. They wouldn't catch the attachment on some of my bottom teeth. So basically nothing happened in those few weeks because the trays weren't properly on my teeth, so they couldn't really move anything. But when I went back into my appointment for my next trays to go on my second series, he actually took off some of the attachments and moved them. So they fit a lot better, and then everything was working smoothly again. For my set 2, it was 18 trays. I've heard that usually it's anywhere from like 10 to 20 again, so I guess I needed 18. At the end of set 2, I went in again to get checked, to see how everything was moving, and he asked me if I thought there was anything else that needed to change, or if I had any concerns, and I said no. He said, do you want to be done? And I said, sounds good to me. So we officially were done, and I just had the 2 more trays to go, which was 17 and 18. And then once I do have the retainers, they say that you wear the retainers all day, just like your aligners, for the first 2 months, and then the next 2 months you can wear them 16 hours a day, and then after that you wear them most nights for the rest of your life. I'm really hoping that this time where my attachments have been off and I'm wearing tray 18 will count towards that first 2 months. Okay, let's talk pain, because I know it's one of the biggest questions. Honestly, it wasn't as bad as I expected. It was uncomfortable, but I never once needed to take pain medication, and I never once couldn't eat. The first few days of the trays, they were definitely weird and uncomfortable, especially when you take the trays out and put them back in. That was definitely when the soreness would be the most noticeable. I definitely understand what people were saying sometimes when it feels like you take your tray out and it feels like you're pulling your teeth out with them. It wasn't like as dramatic as that for me, but like I get what they were saying. And then of course when you sometimes when you take the tray off, you just get this jolt of like, oh God. And then same thing when you snap them back in, it would be like, and then it would like radiate for a little bit. But honestly, it wasn't anything that I couldn't handle. If you have a really low pain tolerance, it might be tougher for you, or if you're moving a lot of teeth or have like really big moves to make, it could be worse. I think it's gonna really depend on the person. I did have to be conscious of what I was eating on those first few days after wearing a new tray. Like I would have to make sure I wasn't eating like really crusty breads, or that I was like eating out of the side of my mouth instead of the front of my mouth sometimes. I feel like I was also really lucky to never really struggle with a lisp. There were obviously times where I did, but I remember like for some reason feeling this pride when they put the attachments on. I put my Invisalign trays on for the first time and I started talking, and my orthodontist was like, wow, good for you. You don't have a lisp. You don't sound different at all. And I was like, yeah, that's because I'm a people pleaser and you'll never know when I'm struggling. Also, my job at that point required me to be talking a lot of the day. So I was like really determined to enunciate and not let the lisp happen. I also never really dealt with dry mouth, though sometimes saliva was a problem for me. Sometimes when the tray wasn't sitting properly, I would like feel little saliva bubbles at the top of the tray, which was really annoying, especially when talking, and like a little bit embarrassing, but it went by pretty quickly and wasn't that big of a deal. Okay, let's talk about some of the rules that you are told or that are like really commonly known. First off, do you really have to wear your trays for 22 hours a day? I'm gonna say yes. Again, I think it's different from every orthodontist. For me, he did want me wearing it from 22 to 24 hours a day. So obviously I leaned 22 hours because you gotta take them out to eat. I was very good with my Invisalign. I only took them out when I was eating. And I was a very quick like, okay, let's eat and then run to the bathroom, clean my teeth, trays back in. Mainly because I was so determined to make this process go as quickly as possible. If I was traveling or like out and about for the day, I was like a little bit more relaxed about it and probably went towards the 20 hours a day. But because I was so diligent all of the other days, it didn't really affect me much. Now, can you drink coffee with your trays? This one is a tough one. I personally didn't because I was really concerned about staining. I think staining with the trays is a real problem and is something you do have to pay attention to. Like for example, if I wanted to have Indian food one night, the work I would have to do to like make sure my mouth was like so clean and had absolutely no residue in it before I put my trays back in. Just something to note. So I was like pretty not interested in, like, coffee for me wasn't worth it, whereas it might be for you. So it's really like up to you and it's very individual. I'm an energy drink lover, so I did have about 2 to 3 Alani Nu energy drinks with a straw every single week. I did get regular like dental cleanings and checkups and stuff, so I made sure like with my like dental team and stuff that nothing was causing an issue for my teeth. There wasn't any like erosion or cavities or anything like that. So again, I was like so on top of my oral health routine that I think it allowed for me to have those energy drinks. I think one thing that they just really want to like stress is trying to have like clear drinks and drinks without sugar, because when you're having drinks with sugar, it can like get trapped under the tray and then you're sitting with the sugar on your teeth and that's when it can cause issues. So I was just really mindful of that. Now, eating with Invisalign. So this was interesting, especially as someone who's struggled with disordered eating, like binge and restrict cycles in the past. The Invisalign diet like wasn't a thing for me. Basically, like when I started Invisalign at first, because it was so uncomfortable, like taking the trays off and putting them back in, and I didn't want to do it too many times, I found myself kind of like stuffing my face a little bit during meals because I was like, oh, I don't want to be hungry soon. I don't want to do this all over again. So that took me a little while to get used to. So it's just something to keep in mind. Basically, like once I just accepted it and like this is a temporary phase and trusted that my body will regulate itself, it eventually did. I did definitely get into a lazy habit with Natrel protein milk because I was like, this is something with calories and protein that I can drink with a straw and then just rinse my mouth out and keep my trays in. I probably had that sometimes too often. Restaurants were weird too because I had to get really comfortable with taking my trays out in public and even like putting them back in public or like running off to the bathroom to clean my teeth in public. But ultimately it was fine. I had quite a few trips with my trays and it honestly like didn't affect my life negatively at all. Now, cleaning routine. This is another thing that I've heard is so different for everyone, and I think it also depends on if you're doing like the 7-day, 10-day, or 14-day trays. For me, with the 7-day trays, what my orthodontist told me to do was basically wake up in the morning, brush my teeth with my trays still in, because you have more of a surface area and you're not like bending the trays when you're trying to clean them. Then take the trays out and scrub the inside of the tray with your toothbrush and toothpaste, and then brush your teeth. I know there are a lot of orthodontists that don't want you to clean your trays with toothpaste, but I think mine said this is what they wanted us to do because like the micro scratches didn't matter since I was only wearing the trays for a week. But again, every single dentist or an orthodontist is different with this instruction. So, and these are the same steps that I did before bed as well. Brush the tray, brush the inside of the tray, brush my teeth, floss, mouthwash. So when it came to eating, at first I would eat and then I would lightly, like gently brush my teeth and then put the trays back in. But after one of my dental cleanings, they noticed that it looked like I was brushing my teeth a little too much. I was also using like a whitening toothpaste, I think probably like Crest 3D White at that point, and I think it was definitely causing some like erosion and things like that. I actually switched to Pronamel by Sensodyne and noticed a huge difference. But what I would do after every time I would eat, I would actually just rinse my mouth out lightly with my water flosser on a really low speed just to kind of push everything out, and then rinse my tray and put my trays back in. And again, I had another dental cleaning after a few months of doing that and they had no concerns about my teeth, so I feel like that was like the right move for me. But again, it's all going to be individual. I was also told not to use the tabs like the Polydent or anything like that on my particular trays. I guess the Invisalign trays are like thinner than your retainer, so they don't hold up as well to things like that. Even though they're only 7-day trays, I don't know, I was just told not to. but I will be using them when I get my retainers. In terms of smells, I didn't really have to worry about my trays smelling because again, they were only 7 days. And I was also so meticulous about my oral health care routine, like morning and night, and constantly rinsing them out, that I think I just was able to like keep them as clean as possible, and so smells were like never a problem for me. I did experience staining here and there from like various things, like maybe coffee or like colored candies, but usually they stained like yellow, but you can't really tell. You couldn't tell like on the teeth. It was when you would take them out, you would see like, especially the back molars were like neon yellow, which wasn't fun, but you can like tell when they were in your mouth. When I was out of the house and traveling, I carried a little to-go bag on me at all times. It basically had an additional like compact case for my trays that also had one of the pull tools in it, a Chewy, and also a Colgate Wisp. That was like my perfect combination, so I had everything I needed at all times. At first I was like, okay, sure, I'll bring like a mini toothbrush and a mini toothpaste to all the restaurants I go to and things like that, but it got old really fast and I just like really couldn't be bothered with it. And again, because I was so like diligent with my oral health on all the other days and like morning and night, I was okay with just like rinsing my mouth out, maybe using one of the Colgate Wisps and then putting my trays back in, but to each their own. Like maybe you think that's gross, maybe you think that's normal. It worked for me. Okay, now let's talk about cost, which I think this is different depending on like how much work you need and like who you go to. I went to an actual orthodontist and I believe my price was 4,995 Canadian dollars. My fiance's insurance actually covered $2,000 of that for me. And then we've been paying 166 Canadian a month for 18 months. This includes all of my orthodontist appointments, the aligner trays, the retainer trays, and I also get a free whitening at the end of this that I have not done yet. So that's exciting. Okay, let's talk the hardest parts of Invisalign. Honestly, I think the most annoying part of the entire thing for me was that you could clearly tell that I had Invisalign. So a lot of people would tell me that they couldn't tell or didn't notice until I said something and like they looked really closely. But I just like couldn't shake the feeling every time I was talking of people looking at my mouth and noticing. And like obviously it's like nothing to be embarrassed about or anything like that, but it's just like weird, like knowing that people are looking at your mouth, you know what I mean? Though I will say I was surprisingly more confident about it than I expected. Like I was taking pictures, smiling, showing the attachments, which before I got Invisalign, I didn't think that I would have the confidence to do. I saw a girl say that if I spent $5,000 on a purse, I would want to be showing it off. And so that is how she's treating her trays. And I was like, you know what? Hell yeah. I love that attitude. I spent a lot of money. I worked really hard to get to a position where I could afford the braces myself as an adult, and I'm doing something really good and exciting for myself, so I'm gonna show it off. It's just temporary. Another thing that I found really annoying was that I noticed that food would get stuck in my teeth way more than it ever had before. I think because of the placement of the attachments, it would like push food into the crevices of my teeth. So like eating out with people was really awkward because I was constantly like eating like this, and then like checking my little compact that had a mirror on it like over and over because I just like hate having food in my teeth. But I mean, if those are the two most annoying parts of Invisalign, like so some unexpected wins of Invisalign. One thing that happened was that it definitely changed my face shape, even just slightly. So basically they had to like widen my smile to make room for the crowded teeth at the bottom. And with that, it very subtly has like shifted my jaw shape a little bit. I have like quite a protruding chin, and I feel like the widening of my teeth is kind of like just brought a little bit more like balance to the protrusion. I don't know, it's very subtle, but I definitely notice it. I think also this Invisalign journey had me looking into my teeth a lot and watching videos about people's journeys a lot. And one thing that really stood out to me is somebody saying that your teeth are kind of like your character. And I realized over time I was more and more okay with the idea of not ending up with like the most perfect like stacked straight teeth where like everything is shaved and shaped and whatever. There are some things that like, yeah, I'd like to change maybe one day, if it really bothers me, if I really care. But I do notice that I definitely have been fixating on my teeth for the past 9 months because I'm checking the progress like every single day. And of course I'm gonna notice like small little things that don't feel like symmetrical or whatever it is. And I'm sure like in a few months when I'm like fully over this process, I'm probably not gonna care at all, you know? So we'll see what ends up happening. Okay, some tips that I think are really important to hear. The first one, I used my removal tool 90% of the time. I pretty much never pulled my tray out just with my teeth. There were obviously times where I did, but I just found like I didn't want to mess up my nails. And I just found it way easier. Like, I feel like I could never get like a latch in order to pull out. So just using the little tool, finding that spot and just pulling down was honestly so easy for me. So highly recommend. There's no shame in using the tool. I recommend being very dedicated to using your chewy. Basically, your chewy is like just a little thing that you chew on to make sure that your tray is seated. I believe your orthodontist will give you some, but there's also tons of them on Amazon. I will link the ones that I use down below. I personally found that this helped seat my tray better, so I feel like my teeth moved more quickly, and I also feel like it helped with the pain in that first few days. I did also notice the weeks where I wasn't as dedicated with my chewy, I did find that the next tray hurt a lot more. So I also downloaded an app called Tray Minder, where I took a photo of my teeth every single week when I changed my tray. So I got to really like monitor the progress and see what was happening, which was really fun for me. And then also so that you don't like gaslight yourself into thinking nothing's happening. I also documented the entire process on TikTok in case you wanted to check that out. Just felt like I had like such a community of people that were going through it themselves or had questions, people that were ahead of me in the process, which was really helpful for me. It was just really nice, and it was like good for accountability. Oh, another hot tip, never put your trays in a napkin. Like when you go out to eat and if you didn't bring your case, try to avoid putting it in a napkin at all costs, because I learned that you are much more likely to throw that napkin away with your trays in it, and then you have to go back to your old trays and get the new ones made again, and it's like this whole thing. So I'm actually really glad I heard that tip before I got Invisalign, so that it was like playing in the back of my mind whenever I would take my trays out. Who is Invisalign for or not for? Like, who's gonna be okay with the process and who's gonna hate it? So I'm a very type A person, and this was a project that I had the capacity to invest in, meaning nothing too crazy was going on in my life at the time, so having to change my lifestyle to accommodate this like wasn't that big of a deal. Also, taking care of my teeth really well and doing so well in the aligner process was so gratifying when I would go to my dentist and orthodontist appointments, and they would just praise me for how good my teeth looked and how fast the process was going and how it was just so easy. If you are more type B, or you are like a really busy person, like maybe you're a mom, maybe you're working a lot of jobs, whatever that may be, this might be more difficult for you. It is a lot of things to be thinking about, and it's definitely a new routine that you need to get used to. And if you're like obsessed with coffee, highly recommend looking up videos of other coffee drinkers with Invisalign to get their take on it. So I don't want to say that I would do this process all over again, because I really don't want to, but if I had to, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And honestly, like the worst of it was really just my own impatience. Okay, and lastly, was it worth it? For me, honestly, yes. It will have been 14 months of my life total. It didn't hurt or bother me that much, despite having these wires in the back of my teeth for the rest of my life, which is an adjustment. I still think that the confidence that it has given me for the next phase of my life going into my 30s is unmatched. I'm also gonna try out the free professional whitening soon, so I will keep you posted on that. Okay, so that was my entire Invisalign journey, and I hope I answered all your questions. Comment down below, let me know what tray you're on, or if there's any questions I missed that you'd really like to have answered. I will also link all the products that I used down below in the description box, so definitely check that out. And make sure you subscribe if you want to keep up with my retainer and whitening update. See you next time.